and hosting this webinar today. I'm thrilled to be able to just say hello to, looks like we've got over 50 participants already. So thank you guys for making time today to join this conversation. I wanted to just say a few words onto how we launched this initiative and really reflecting on what Lena has said. Despite recent conversations that have taken place in the sector around safeguarding, diversity, etc., and toxic cultures still exist within our organizations. We in the aid sector have yet to achieve the type of change in our cultures that we desire, at least at a widespread level. Some organizations have been able to do that, and we're really keen to learn best practices to help others do that. So as a result of looking at this last summer, actually it's hard to believe it's been a year, the CHS launched an initiative with Marianne Clemens, who's with us today, and Melissa Patati, who is currently on maternity leave. And the initiative was and is called Cultivating Caring and Compassionate Aid Organizations. Now, the initiative looks at the intersection between three main areas: mental health, people management, and organizational culture, using those lenses and then using the lenses of care and compassion. It builds on the CHS organizational responsibility, which comes under Commitment 8, where we are to have policies in place for the security and well-being of staff. And so with that, I'm pleased that Marianne and our others panelists here today can share with you more on this. And I'd just like to thank Luxembourg and DFID for their current support to the initiative at this point. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and over to you, Marianne. Thanks.
Thanks, Jules. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I'll just introduce you briefly, and maybe we'll introduce ourselves briefly. So as Jules already mentioned, I'm Marianne Clements. I've been working on this initiative with CHS Alliance for the past, almost year. My other work in the sector is partly now around this issue of well-being, mental health and care, and I also do a number of other things with organizations in the sector as a consultant. I've worked with funders, lots of women's rights and feminist organizations, and I also now work on anti-racism and aid as well. And I have with me Hope Chigudu, who I think, Hope, perhaps let's have you say something about yourself. Can we hear you and have you tell us a bit about you and who you are? Oh, I don't hear you. Can we?
Thanks very much, Mary Ann. I'm an activist, I'm a feminist. I do work on organizational development and well-being. I work with women's funds. I work with LGBTIQ organizations. I work with, different organizations in Africa and in Asia. My big, my big joy in this world is seeing organizations that work with a soul, S-O-U-L, organizations that are centered, organizations that, where individuals matter and take care of themselves. So I'm very, very happy to be part of this initiative.
Thank you so much, Hope, and welcome to conversation. So, and we also have Nahida Rahim with us today as well. Nahida, do you want to say just a few words about yourself to introduce people?
Hi, I'm Nahida, or Haida for short. I met Marianne's and started talking last summer, so I got involved in this project as an aside of what I already was doing, which is I've been an aid worker for the last 10 years or so, and in the last 5, I've been primarily working on the Syrian crisis, and in the last couple of years, been also supporting other aid workers to sort of recover and heal from their own burnout through individualized coaching. So out of that work is where I started to understand a little bit better and a lot more perspective in terms of how organizational culture and how where we work, you know, the spaces that we see ourselves going to every single day just impact our sort of mental health and such. So I'm really excited to see where today's conversation is going to go, and see what we come up with.
Great, thanks so much, Haida. So the three of us are working with CHS at the moment on a series of conversations, and we're going to tell you a bit more about those as we go through today. But I just wanted to outline before we kind of dive in, or what we want, what we hope we'll offer you today, which I think is a bit of a space to think about well-being, and including your own well-being in the context of your work. And we hope also to offer you some practical strategies that you can experiment with yourself and maybe in your organization as well. And we're also going to offer you some thoughts about the wider change that's needed in our sector in relation to the issue of well-being, mental health, and how we might start to address the toxic cultures in organizations that Jules mentioned, and bring more organizations with soul of the kind that hope inspires us to think about. And then we will also give you a bit of information about how you can get more involved in the initiative and the conversations that we're planning going forward. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an outline of what we hope to do. We will give you a break at around 12 o'clock so that we're not grinding you and wearing you out at the webinar, so you can go and get a drink or use the toilet or whatever you need to do, and then we'll come back again. So just to give you that information up front. So having given you a bit of an outline, I'm just going to invite you now to just take a few moments wherever you are, and we're just going to switch the energy a little bit and just pay a bit of attention to our own bodies. If you want to, you can close your eyes. I might do that, but please feel free to do whatever feels appropriate wherever you are right now, and just bring some attention to your breath. You don't have to change your breath. It's not a complicated exercise at all, but just notice how your breath is today. The breath that literally sustaining you in each moment. How does it feel right now? And as you do that, you might then also want to scan the rest of your body and just notice how it's feeling. Maybe you're sitting in a chair. How do you feel in the chair? Could you do something just to bring a bit more comfort, a bit more joy to the sensation in your body in the moment? Just inviting you to bring that awareness of how you're doing physically as we open our webinar today. So one of the ways that we can pay attention to how we're doing is simple practices that bring a bit of awareness as to how's our breath, how's our body feeling. And often if we're feeling like really stressed and burnt out, and then you know, those things will give us some clues, right? So we just wanted to bring that practice as we open, and I'm going to invite Hope. Are you there? I'm not seeing your picture now, Hope. Hope? Yeah,
yes,
hi.
I'm here.
Welcome to.
I was still breathing.
Sorry. And so we're going to be inviting people to share in the chat quite a bit as well as we go. So just to say, it's open for you to be discussing as we ask questions and sharing with us.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Hope.
Thanks very much. So colleagues, I'll start by sharing a bit of my story and where I am. I'm from Zimbabwe. Lockdown found me in Uganda. I had come for 6 months. I've been here I had come for 6 days. I've been here for 5 months. So every day, I don't know whether to invest in Uganda or whether to keep my bags packed. So where am I today? I'm I'm very, very grateful that I'm in Uganda, where people have really taken care of me. You know, every day someone checks on me. Every day, you know, someone said something. There is even someone who came and said, "Oh, Hope, we understand you're a refugee now. We are going to take you like all refugees. So I'm going to find out what refugees in Uganda are getting, and then you can get it too." But that is my rose. That is my happiness. That is what I'm grateful for. That I'm stuck here instead of 6 days. I'm here for 5 months, but I'm still, you know, cared for. I'm alive. I'm working, and you know, I've made friends. But I have a thorn or a challenge, or you know, something that really keeps pricking me, or is pricking me as I'm talking to you now. I'm not with my family, and every day, you know, I keep wondering how they are. You ask people, how are you? They say they are okay, but I'm never sure that they are okay. So I'm pricked. The thorn in my body is that. My challenge, the thing that I think about is that. So I'm going to ask you to share, you know, your thorn, share your rose. Your rose is your joy. It's what you are celebrating. Your thorn is, yeah, I'm here, but you know, there is this thing as well, given the context, given, you know, where we are today in our history, given what we know and what we have experienced in the past few months. So we are going to ask you to write in the chat afterwards. You know, a few people can, you know, share. You have 5 minutes to think about this and respond. And once again, we are happy to be here and to be with you. So let's start.
Yeah, so you can share in the chat about your rose and your thought, and maybe we'll share our own as well shortly, but we'll just give you a minute to think of things.
Yes.
And just to add, if people have questions, they can go in the Q&A, whereas the sharing, we can use the chat for.
Yeah. So maybe after a minute, Mary Ann, Haida, you could also tell us if you have thorns pricking you and what some of the roses are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So just to share, so the idea of the rose is like something that you feel joyful about. So like Hope's example of people caring for her, even though she's a refugee in Uganda at the moment. So like my joy right now is, like a big joy anyway, is that I have like a cemetery near my place, which is like a small woodland, even though I live in the city. And that the fact that I can go there and walk amongst the trees, yeah, there are other people there, but there's a sense of like being in nature that gives me that sense of being connected to something bigger, being rooted, you know, being grounded in a way. Like that's my rose. That's my thing that I feel really grateful for. For me, like the big thorn in COVID has been that, you know, the physical separation, not being able to kind of hug people, you know. And I do, you know, like probably a lot of us, I do so much online now. I do so much, and I, you know, feel really grateful for it. And at the same time, I really miss just being able to go give someone a big hug who isn't someone that lives in my household, you know. So that physical connection for me, that's a thorn. So yeah, we're just inviting you to think for yourself, like in your life right now, what are your joys, your roses, your things you feel really grateful for, and what are your thorns, the things that are like things you're struggling with, challenges, and you know, feel free to share one or two. There might be many, right?
Yes.
Either.
Mary,
For
sorry.
me, Sorry.
Yeah.
For me, when I think about the roses, I would say that I'm actually pretty lucky right now where I can go. I'm currently based in Turkey. I'm originally from Singapore. So I've been here the last sort of on and off for the 5 years. But I've been lucky in this COVID-19 to be able to travel to the coast, to the Mediterranean coast, where I can work because I work from home now. And that's been a great pleasure because, you know, compared to many people elsewhere where they're, stuck in one space, in one place, I'm able to go to the sea. And that's something I've always enjoyed. So it is like, a working holiday in that regards. At the same time, what I struggle with, I would say my thorn is the fact that, all this COVID-19 have derailed a number of my plans, I feel, and I'm a planner. I plan things to the details. So when this happened, I just feel, just swung off the boat. My summer holidays been ruined. Things I want to do with my friends have always, just kind of been taken apart, and now I have to replan and do something else. And whenever I feel that way, I kept thinking like, well, there are things I still can do. So it's a bit of both. Every other day I go between my roses and my thorns. So
Hope your voice is off. Hope,
Sorry,
go
I
ahead.
wasn't muted. Yeah, no, I thank you very much. We can get feedback from a few people, and then as we pick some of the issues from the chat. So if you want to share loudly, you have an opportunity to do that. But as we are many, we can only allow a few, and then we go on to the next item on our agenda.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some people sharing in the chat. Lots of similar things around missing contact, and feeling grateful for nature, for being healthy, for the things that are still here. Yeah. Hope, did you see anything in the chat that oh, I don't know if you can see it. Nice. Yeah, so they're beautiful, the things that you're sharing. Thanks everyone. And then thorns like being stuck away from family, not being able to see people, and anxiousness around that, around the current context as well. Yeah.
So anyone that wants to share loudly?
If anybody would like to come on and share with us, just let us know and we can give you we'll put your mic on. But I think you'd have to let us know in the chat. If anyone feels brave to share, let us know. Maybe it's
I have to say that someone posted on the chat that baking bread and cheese scone is a great new skill, and Stephen James said that, and I was like, yeah, me too. I've learned to bake my first sourdough, and it took me 25 days from beginning to the final bread. But I'm very grateful to now have done it because I know what flour, water, and a little bit of salt can do. So.
Great, thanks, Haida. So maybe we move on, Hope. If no, I see people are sharing, and we'll keep tracking and watching what you're sharing, but no one's volunteered to come on live. So let's move on, Hope.
Thanks very much. I hope that we've had time to think seriously about, what our thoughts are, what, some of the joys we're experiencing. Because no matter how difficult things are, there are things one can be grateful, and gratitude is one way of reminding ourselves to be well. There is something that happens when we wake up and we say, yes, there is this and this and that, but at the same time, we are grateful that things somehow are balancing out. So that is why we ask this question. Yes, there are different moments, difficult moments, but you take time to appreciate some of the beautiful things that are happening. So we want to share some nuggets of well-being with you. Well-being as happens in your life, well-being when at organizational level, well-being at community level. Because no matter that you are well, if your organization is not well, you are never going to be well. Or organization is well, but you are not. That doesn't work well either. Or you are well, but you are working with communities that are really not well. That doesn't work. So how do we take care of ourselves, our well-being as individuals? Because it starts with us, and then take care of organizations and the people that we work with. We would like to start by talking about grounding. Grounding as really standing and knowing I'm grounded emotionally, grounded spiritually, grounded physically, and grounded intellectually. That too matters. There are many, it could even be grounding financially. I even fear going there. But anyway, feeling that you are grounded. We know what happens when a tree is not strong. It might appear very beautiful outside. It's flourishing. It's, it really, it has got flowers, but once there is a strong wind, that's the end. So sometimes we walk around, we look, okay, but are we really grounded? Are we very strong? Can we say that if there is a huge tsunami in our bodies, in our families, in organizations, we can stand? When we are not grounded, sometimes it's because there is an overload of feelings. We are loaded, with feelings. There are so many things happening, and we are juggling this, juggling that, juggling the other. When there are so many things going on at this time, at the same time, that might unground us. Sometimes we are ungrounded by lack of voice. We want to speak, but words remain stuck in the throat. So much that we want to say and we don't say it. And that can unground us because, when we can't express ourselves, when we can't speak up, when we feel that there is so much I'm trying to say, so much, and remain stuck in the body, we get ungrounded and sometimes we get sick. When we feel that we are not cared about, we are not loved, we are not, okay, we can get grounded. We get ungrounded when the energy, when the fire is gone, and there isn't even enough fire to enable us to digest our food. The fire is gone, we wake up and we don't know, so why am I here? What happens? And when that fire goes, we know what happens to our bodies. As I said, there isn't even enough oxygen to enable us, do the things we would want to do. And, we could talk about some of the physical things that happen as a result, but, there is not much time for that. When we are not grounded, even our own sexuality suffers. When we are not grounded, we walk in the world as if we are not here. So the question is, can we just take a moment to scan our bodies? Just think about your body. Your body, how you are breathing, your heart, how it is beating inside your body, the food that you ate this morning, the sensations, when you take a scan of your body, how are you feeling? You might not tell us, but you can tell yourself, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Are you here? Do you feel really here? Which part of your body is not well? Which emotions are going through your mind? What exactly, is your body telling you? Are you tired? Are you tense? Are you excited? What is your body telling you? How does it feel about starting this day? We've already started it, but there is a big chunk of it to go. So what is it telling you about the other chunk of the day? If you think about your body going through the routines that we go through whether it is, touching doors, papers, dishes, children, lovers, is it ready to engage, or are you forcing it? Think about, some of the work that you are doing. Is it work that really fits your soul? Are you happy and excited to be doing that work? If you have a pen, could you just write down some of the things that you feel as you take a scan of your body? Could you also write about things you're excited and things you are very grateful for? So as we do this, I just want to remind us that your body, my body, is your vehicle, it's my vehicle. Your body is your vehicle. And some of you who drive service your body, service your vehicles. Imagine we service our vehicles, we see that they are clean, we do things, but we don't service our bodies. And even if you don't drive, you want to go into a vehicle that is serviced. Because when a vehicle is not serviced, it endangers you, it endangers other people, and it endangers our own workspaces. So the body is a vehicle and it needs to be serviced. It needs to be loved. It needs to be cared for. Part of grounding is ensuring that that vehicle is in a good state, that you can trust it, that you can appreciate it and spend time on it. But it's not just the physical body, it's also the mind and it's the spirit. And much as our bodies are our vehicles, even organizations are our vehicles, sometimes they are not rooted. And things that, uproot organizations. Some were mentioned when we started: lack of diversity, safeguarding measures that don't safeguard anyone, toxic culture. Those things can uproot us. They make it very difficult for organizations to be solid, to stand out, and you really, look forward to going there. So we need to think about organizations too when we think about grounding and grounding. But the most important thing that I want to emphasize here is that our bodies are our vehicles. We need to wake up and do a scan the way a mechanic does when you take your vehicle for repair or just maintenance. And as I've said, even if you don't drive, you still know the importance of a vehicle. So our bodies are our vehicles. They enable us to eat. They enable us, to exist, to do wonderful things, to do great things. But if we don't take care of them, they can also fall apart. Within the body are our emotions, and our spirit. So the body really, is a house of those elements that we don't see, that we can't touch. And we need to take care of those too. So as, I hand over to my colleagues, I just want to ask you how often you take care of your body. Do you consider yourself grounded? Be honest to yourself, even if you don't say it. Do you consider yourself grounded? How often do you exercise consciously? How often do you exercise, work out, dance, do yoga? How often do you do that? Do you feel that you have a right to be here on this earth, planet Earth? As you walk, do you say, yes, I'm happy to be here, I'm part of this world, and I am contributing, and I know I'm proud of what I've contributed. Do you feel that you have a right to be here? Indeed, you came to be here and to make things happen. So take care of your vehicle. Ensure that when it harbors the soul, the spirit, it is in a good state to really, not damage them, not cause harm, but take care of them very well, protect them. This is the only vehicle you have. You are not going to be given another one that is exactly like the one you have. You are not going to ask someone to exchange their bodies with yours. It's yours, taking care of it, and be proud of it. So that is one of our nuggets: grounding us, grounding organizations, and making sure that we have a right to be here. And since we have a right, we're going to be happy. So let me ask Haida to come in, and or maybe if there are questions, if I even ask Haida or comments, we can deal with that, and then Haida and Mary Anna will come in as well.
Marianne, do you want to jump in, or should I?
Yeah, I can do. So I just wanted to jump in and locate some of that in a few thoughts about sort of burnout and organizational culture, and then kind of bring us back to another nugget, if that's all right. So I wanted to talk about this idea of toxic organizational culture, and the WHO says that their definition is that burnout is unmanaged organizational stress, and so there's a sense in their definition of organizational responsibility. And then I also think that that burnout is something that we might be like culturally inclined towards. So I did a load of interviews when I first started thinking about issues of wellbeing in the sector. I did interviews with a group of women working in the sector and asked them about their well-being, like how they were feeling. Some of these questions that we've asked you already, like how are you doing? How's your work going? And what are your challenges? And so many of their challenges were around trying to do way too much with way too little time, and the things that were cropping up in their lives, and sometimes cropping up in their personal lives as well as their professional lives, were basically challenges related to just having way too much on their plate, and also believing that the only way in which they could do a good job and try and achieve the change they wanted to in the world was by constantly being as busy as possible, constantly working extra hours, constantly trying to finish another report, all of that stuff. And I think most of us in the sector are familiar with some of that. And we might recognize that some of it comes from us internally, like we push ourselves, and quite a lot of it comes from an organizational context where we could say there's unmanaged organizational stress. And I think beyond that, there is also like a kind of structural and systemic context beyond even our organizations, where that's what we expect, that's what we think is good, like hard work is good, looking after ourselves, caring for ourselves. There's kind of these kind of soft qualities that we think are kind of nice to have. We don't see them as central. And I think part of our work is really trying to persuade people in the sector actually care, and making in organizations both ways that people can individually remember to think about their vehicle, like Hope said, but also organizationally we think about the vehicle. We think about, can people be well in this organization? Is it possible? And will they then be able to do their best work? And I think, all three of us firmly believe that we can't do our best work, we can't create the best change in the world without that. And so and I wanted to just briefly read something, and I hope, which is from this book by Alessandra Pini, that people may know. She died a few years ago, so she's not with us anymore, but she wrote a book called The Idealist Survival Guide, 75 Simple Ways to Avoid Burnout. And I wanted to read the chapter 2, the burnout recipe. I'm not going to read all the intro to it, but I'm just going to read the recipe for you and see if you recognize yourself in this at all. So, preparation for the recipe. The organization should set up a culture of overwork, preferably in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situation. If possible, keep people's job descriptions unclear and contracts vague. Make sure donors demand absurd reporting and impose a constant parade of visitors. To this, add, not necessarily in equal measure, the following ingredients. 1, lack of control over the work, lack of participation in decision-making, lack of feedback. 2, insufficient rewards for the amount of effort that people put in. 3, workplace community problems such as incivility and a lack of support amongst co-workers, lack of social support from supervisors, role conflicts or role ambiguity, a poor contract or no contract at all. 4, lack of fairness such as inequality of pay, promotions or workload. 5, finally, mixed with a conflict of one's personal values and the requirements of a job. And I think this one's really important. New staff think they're going to spend time with the community doing meaningful work, and now they're stuck in an office behind a computer complying with donor requests. And then she does bring in the personal. So she says, do-gooders, you play your part too. Make sure you bring perfectionism in abundance, personal value derived from how much you get done, a fear of showing your personal needs and emotions, total availability of your days, nights and weekends, and the incapacity to say no and set healthy boundaries, high expectations, and a romanticized view of the non-profit sector. I'm going to stop there, but it's a great book. There are many nuggets in this book, but I think I wanted to use that because I think she kind of brilliantly in that recipe kind of sets out the problem that we're grappling with today, and in the work we're doing with CHS Alliance. And this is not just an HR issue, as Jules said, it's not just a people management issue. It's an organisational culture issue, and it's an issue for all of us. And as we found in our research for CHS Alliance as we're developing the initiative, well-being and mental health provision do in our sector sometimes become a side issue or a project that is under-resourced, and maybe like one person has responsibility for it and they don't have a budget and things like that. Or we may provide services for our international staff and not for national staff. So there's vast inequality in how we're providing wellbeing service within organisations. And for me, there are big links between what we know about toxic environments in terms of our well-being and what we know about racism and how it shows up in our sector, and what we know about power and what we know about so-called safeguarding issues and sexual abuse and exploitation. Like, these are all issues of toxic culture to me. And so this is a culture and political issue, as well as an issue that's very much rooted in this groundedness in our own bodies, in our own experience, and in our own understanding of how does it feel to be in our organisation. And like, fundamentally, we can't build a better world by running ourselves into the ground, because you know, we can't, we're out of sync with our values if we're exhausting ourselves supposedly in service of some greater good. And so I believe very fundamentally that we have to get to grips with this issue in order to wrestle with some of these issues in our sector. So well-being being one, and issues of power and abuse being others. And so the focus on our bodies and our groundedness as intro is not, it's not just a nice to have, like, it's deliberate. And we want to invite you to think about how you can do that in your work, how you can do it in your organizations, how you can bring practices that may not be familiar in the very professionalized context. And we can share a link, but there's also, many of you may have seen the piece about white supremacy culture in organizations, and Okun, and I've forgotten the other name now I'm speaking, but they talk about urgency, they talk about over professionalizing, they talk about all of these characteristics that show up so much in our sector and in our organizations, and they're the things that act against our well-being. You know, those are the things that make it so hard for us to care for one another and to do our work well. So I wanted to draw some of that, and then invite Haida also to share.
I was just thinking about the book by Alexandria, and we have 2 copies at home because my partner and I decided it was just too much work for us to share a book while trying to kind of manage our well-being. So we ordered 2 copies. And it's very fascinating because when we read the book and when we kind of reflect upon the work we do, Alexandra was very right when she said that burnout happens when our expectations are not meeting our, realistic experience. And that's when we kind of burn out. The job we undertook, is suddenly not what it turns out to be. Like you said, I was that reporting officer who went to the field and then sat there and write report after reports, and didn't realize that this was the job I'm going to be doing pretty much for the rest of my aid work career. And I kept doing, because I think as a young aid worker then, I took on what I thought was needed to be done in order to kind of grow in the industry and to kind of show like, yeah, I can do this, like you said, don't say no. And I don't think any of my colleagues or my peers then ever said no to anything, whether it's, being called on the weekends to do extra hours of work, being sent an email at 11 p.m. and responding to it. I don't think we really said no, because we wanted to so much to grow in our professional careers, and at the same time we just didn't want to look like we couldn't do this. And I think that's also an underlying sort of culture we perpetuate, that not, you have to be available, but if you're new to this industry, you must give everything to this organization that you're working for, to the sector. Your convenience, your well-being is secondary. It's not a priority. When you go on vacations, take your laptop with you, take your work with you. There is no separation between you and the organization. There's somehow, I feel in my experience, there was this expectation of total loyalty that needs to come from me. And that loyalty took everything in my entire, early years of my career, because I would be, yeah, just give it to me. I don't say no, I'll pick up, I'll just do everything.
Did we lose Nahida?
I think we did.
I just
Mid-flow.
Yeah.
mid-flow. Yeah. Sorry, everyone. I hope. Let's see if she comes back in a second. But we continue. I see there's a question, so I was just going to look at it anyway. So maybe we could ask that. Burnout and resilience are still very misunderstood in the workplace. How can we advocate globally for removing the burden placed on workers to be thorough? Is that be tough? Oh, I think it's be tough, and to implement long-term changes in a heavy working environment. Let's me and Hope, let's talk about that, and then hopefully we'll get Nahida back. So what do you think? How can we advocate globally, Hope, for removing the burden placed on workers to be tough? I think it's to be tough, although it's, and to implement long-term changes to the heavy working environment in organizations. Do you have some thoughts? Your mic's off again, Hope. I can't hear you. Hope. It's okay, don't worry.
I said, I think some other people might have thoughts on that. I'll share mine, and then others who also want to come in can come in. Some time back, I was bothered, not some time back, it's a long time ago. I was bothered by the way funders talk about sustainability of organizations, but not sustainability of human beings who work in those organizations. That bothered me for a very, very long time, because, every time we talked about organizations, there would be a question about sustainability of the organization. Never was there a question about sustainability of human beings who work in those organizations. In other words, you can work as much as you want, you can drop dead, but make sure that the organization is sustainable. It's not about you, it's not about, just strengthening the inner you, so that it can strengthen the outer, the program, the work that we do. It was never about that. So I think one of the things that is important about this work is creating our movements. Because when you are one person in an organization and you know what to do, and and you keep talking about it, you are the one who is going to be made fun of, you are the one who is not going to be listened to, and you might even have to leave. How do we create movements that take care of well-being as a political issue? Not just the issue we talk about, in passing, but an issue that, has got strong elements of power in it. Because to be well means that as a collective, we have to be well. And we need to have those movements that can push well-being. If there are many, many voices, pushing well-being, then, it is going to be seen, well-being is going to be seen as the work that we do. It's not by the way. Because the tendency now is like, oh, well-being, by the way, there is well-being too. But it's the work. Even when we talk about the well-being of refugees, if we talk about well-being of, displaced people, we are still talking about well-being, but we remove ourselves from that work. So well-being, we have to recognize, is not by the way, and we need a critical mass of people who can start pushing it, talking about it, fundraising for it, and organizing big forums such as this one, talk about it, and really ensuring that we budget for it, because I think anything that is not budgeted for eventually dies. We need strong ownership. I don't know if we can do it different. I know if there is another way, maybe, but I see that us first starting with us, see that well-being is the work. It's the work that we do. It's not by the way. Because when we are not well, work can't go on. Secondly, to politicize it so that, it is one of the things in the organization. It's one of the objectives. It's in the strategic plan. It's in our budgets, and it's respected. To report on it, to create spaces where we report on various, well-being activities or unwell activities that didn't work, poisonous things that didn't work. I think, there could be other, ways of doing it, but it seems Haida has come back, and, let me stop there unless others want to add.
I'm sorry, my internet misbehaves at the same time every day, and I still have not learned my lesson. I apologize.
That's okay. Did you want to finish up what you were saying, or has the moment gone? Which is also fine.
No, I mean, I just wanted to point out, like, I had a quick thought, and that's just that I think, burnout for a lot of aid workers, particularly for young aid workers, which is new to the industry, it becomes something that people take on as though like it is expected of you to burn out in order to show how productive and how great you are at that job. So people are just like, you know what? And, there's this saying, well, pretty much that if you're not broken, then there's nothing to fix. So people kind of stretch out that meaning of burnout, like, oh, I'm just tired, oh, I'm just exhausted and frustrated, but I'm not burnt out, like I'm not like, I can carry on. So people keep the cycle going on until they're physically broken, or they fall sick, and suddenly, like, you've passed that line, that threshold, and I think that's going to hurt you even more. But I think this is something that we need to start changing, that we catch burnout not when you're actually already, at a point where you need more than just day-to-day self-care, that you actually need a bit more than that. But we need to catch that on. We need to be a bit more observant in terms of the workspaces we're in, the people we interact with. And burnout, like I think somebody said this earlier, burnout, I don't think, for me, is no longer just an individual thing. It has to be an individual and a together thing, because I burn out, but it's a circumstance, it's a consequence of something else that's around me as well. So for me, what has been important in my own burnout recovery and kind of managing my own mental well-being is, I know that burnout is not my fault necessarily. I need to start looking at it as a together, the community helps perpetuate a culture as well. So I need to also stop guilting myself into, I burn out because I didn't exercise enough, because I didn't do enough yoga and meditation, and it's upon me. And I need to, like, yes, partly I could take better care, but I also work in an environment where I'm push and push and push, and I need to acknowledge that as well. And I think it goes both ways. So That's just my
Yeah.
nugget that I wanted to add.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I just wanted to add on the question that we were answering. So I think our hope with the initiative, with the Building Caring Compassionate Organisations initiative of CHS Alliance, is start to build some of this momentum that Hope was talking about, to really engage organisations in these conversations more, to uplift them, to help invite people to start thinking about, well, how do we resource this kind of well-being in organizations, and how do organizations really get to grips with what does it look like to have a culture where people are cared for and are therefore enabled to do their work well. And actually that's a practice, that's an ongoing conversation. That's not something that you can solve like you write a policy tick, that's something that is about the things we do day to day, all these things. And like Haida said, it's there are pieces that are on us, and there are many pieces that are on the organization and what we do together and how we build that together. So just adding that I agree with everything that's been said. And someone's asked a question. Maybe we'll take this and then we'll get back to where we were. But this is an interesting question. Is burnout experienced by unpaid volunteers? I've got an answer to that, and I think it can be for sure, because I think burnout is not directly related to how much we're paid, right? So it's not like I get burnt out the more I'm paid. In fact, in many cases, it may be the other way around, right? And I don't think that money is necessarily a motivator to burnout. Now, it's true, of course, in our organizations, for some people, it's the pressure of their job that's contributing to burnout. But I think, as we've already highlighted, because we're talking about a cultural issue, we're talking about an issue that is prevalent in many of our spaces. And I think, it's fair to say beyond development and aid spaces, but, of course, in the initiative, we have a specific focus on that in the sector. And we really see this dynamic that we've already spoken to, of people really wanting to make a difference in the world and therefore kind of sacrificing themselves. And I think that can for sure show up in volunteers. And in fact, I have this thing I sometimes talk about, which I got from a good friend of mine, which is that the compulsive volunteer is a kind of thing that shows up in some of us, right? Where we keep on volunteering for things, perhaps on top of our paid jobs, perhaps because we're a person, we may be an unpaid person in the organization who always says, yes, I can do that. And so, choosing, one of the things I work with people on quite a lot is choosing what you're going to say yes and no to very deliberately. Being very clear about what are the things that I can add, what's the value that I add, not in that financial sense, but in the sense of like, what am I clear about what I'm doing and what I'm actually not going to say yes to. And I don't think that culture of accepting people's no is necessarily alive and well in many of our organizations. But I think, part of this is that. Part of this is people being able to say yes and no, and not feeling like they just have to take everything that's lumped on them. I wonder what others think. Can burnout be experienced by unpaid volunteers? What do you think?
I had a friend years ago, like ages ago, who basically she was an unpaid intern with the UN, because the UN don't pay your interns, right? And she was also doing it in, a place that's not really cheap. She was doing it in Geneva. And for her, like, that was extremely stressful, because she wanted to show that she was capable of doing the work. So she kept pushing. And yet at the same time, the stress of like managing your finances while you're doing your grad school and then all of this. And and we had a discussion years later from that experience, was that before even people got into the industry of the work, we've already set the ground, like, this is the nature of how your lifestyle will be if you come and join the international development sector. You will work hard, you will put everything into it, you'll be really busy and so on. And she kind of like was in some ways petrified of wanting to go into development, because she thought, like, why would I want to pull my hair out and get tired and feel sick and miserable and stressed out every single day, coming home after 10 or 8 hours of work and slog myself while I'm at home, because I need to prove that as an intern, I am ready to go. So I think we also need to change that sort of culture of how we treat people who are about to enter the sector, and not, well, partly not to scare them off, but to not burn them out even before they actually, gain experience. Because we're going to start seeing how, a lot of high turnout, high turnover. That's been basically what I've seen, the turnover in a lot of organizations due to people they can't carry on. It's either they have to quit their job, resign. And I think that's a shame because a lot of good people leave. Yeah.
We said we were going to give a break on the hour, and it's 2 minutes past. So I'm going to keep my promise and give us a 5-minute break. We're going to put on some music. You might have heard a bit at the beginning. You can go use the toilet. You can go get a drink. You can have a stretch. You can do whatever you need to do. And we're going to just invite you to take that pause. And it's a deliberate practice as part of this work, as part of thinking about how do we do the small things that help us promote well-being. So we're going to be back at 7 minutes past the hour and sharing some more practical things that you can do and answering more questions. So we'll see you shortly.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got, don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. The love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, bring me down, can't none bring me down. The love is too high.
I wanted to invite you to share another nugget if you're ready to do that. Yeah, and then we will come to all the questions in a little bit. Welcome.
Thank you. I want to talk about a nugget connected to what has been raised, setting boundaries. We are working within a context where Zooms are everywhere, and many of us are working from home. There is family, there are visitors, there are lovers, there are friends. We are working with constituencies, some which are really in need. Like here in Uganda, women have been abused, young women have been raped, and you get phone calls even in the middle of the night. There are all these things. How do we self-nurture? How do we take care of our bodies and set boundaries? Setting boundaries is not an easy thing. Because if you are used to keeping an open door policy, setting boundaries can be very difficult, but it's something that we have to be intentional about. Because as we learn to keep boundaries, we also learn, we also teach others to, create their own boundaries. Whether they are friends, whether they are parents, whether they are children, they will learn their boundaries. But setting boundaries will work if only we adhere to what we say we are going to do. If today we say, I'm going to read from 8 to 10, and then you are still, not really even respecting that yourself, what are you saying to your family? I know it can never be that you set boundaries and they are cast in stone, but at the same time, discipline is important, because if we don't, if we are not disciplined, how does it work? It is going to be business as usual. At least set boundaries, be very strong, and once you are very clear, then you can break them every now and again. But at least set boundaries, and for 21 days, try and adhere, to those boundaries. It can be very hard for women who have children and are working from home, but I think kids understand. If you sit with them and explain and really be serious about it, Mary Anna, you've got a little one, they will still understand, and sometimes they will come and knock and say, isn't it true that this is your time? And then you just say, yes, they'll go back. But you've also got to be open when their time comes, then be with them. Don't just be there to rebuke them because you are working from home. Don't do this, don't do that. When it is their time, let them know it's their time. Do the right thing, and the next time you need your boundaries, they'll be okay with that. And I think that goes for lovers, it goes for family members, and many other things that we set boundaries. At work, setting boundaries might be a lot harder unless it's agreed, as a group. It's part of your conversation, it's part of staff meetings, it's part of the culture, that there are times when you have to keep boundaries. It can't be every day because there are emergencies. But to try as much as possible, I think, as Haida said, that at least that once I have gotten home, I can do my work, and I can be with family, and probably life will continue even if I don't respond to my phone call. And I'm saying this very much aware that some people are doing emergency work that won't work, but there will be other ways of setting boundaries. I want to connect setting boundaries with self-nurturance, taking care of ourselves and prioritizing ourselves, building on what I said earlier in the morning. I don't know about many other movements, but I know that in the women's movement, you can be an activist, work. You miss all the family weddings. You never get together with friends. You miss funerals. You miss many of the things that make societies. On top of that, you don't learn any skill. Everything you read is about NGOs. If you were an artist, you even forget that you were an artist, or you even forget to visit, a museum, or to go to art, exhibitions. You don't learn any new language unless you are forced to because of the nature of the work. You really find that you've created a world of your own, and with a few activists. And then what happens when you need the family? What happens when you leave this work and you find that you have no skill? You never cultivated any skills outside your work, situation. When you find that even things you knew, you've forgotten them. You used to be an artist, you used to be a musician, you used to be a creator. You were there out in the world, absorbing it, enjoying it, flourishing. And then you get sucked into the work. What happens? That's when we become depressed. That's when we become lonely. That's where we have no address whatsoever in this world except the address of the organization we are working for. That's when we find that even family may not care as much, as it should. So how do we then, nurture ourselves and try and be part of the world? Yes, we can't be there all the time because activism takes a long time, but try very much to budget for these things. Because if you think about what supports you, your root, You might find it's the family, you might find it's art, you might find it's creativity. Do you have time for those things? Do you budget for them? If books, are part of that, nurturance, do you budget for books? Do you budget to read those books? Where do you get your knowledge from? We are talking about well-being, but the skills, the knowledge, where do you get it from? Do you have time to read? I see, reference books here, but do you even have time to read those? And then, as you study in this world, walk in this world, that STEM, that big, that big, what can I call it? The thing that really holds you. Think about it. Do you have time? You say friends can uphold you. They are your, the what I was looking for. Trump, they are your Trump. They hold you. I'm not talking about the Trump that we know, the other Trump. Tree. I'm thinking of a tree trunk, not Trump trunk. Friends are your trunk. That is the big thing that holds you. But do you have time for it? Do you have time for friends rather? Do you have time for, if movies are, do you have time for that? And then, I think we need to keep thinking about what we are grateful for in this work. So what I'm saying is, we can set boundaries, provided we are aware, conscious that we need to set boundaries. We need self-nurturance, and we need to identify those things that nurture us. If they're important, let's budget for them in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of emotions. I'm also saying that if we neglect things that nurture us, when we need them, they will not need us. They will not be there. You need friends suddenly, and they are not there. But also we forget what we knew. And I'm also saying that try and cultivate other things, your talents. Don't forget them. Try and be, who you are meant to be. If you were singing, at least try and, create music in your space. If you are an artist, try and, keep doing your artwork. Because when you don't do that, you are killing one part of yourself. You are killing one part of yourself, and to bring it back is going to be difficult. So before I again hand over, I want us to think about an exercise. You won't do it, you might not do it now, but when you go home, please think about it. Write a letter about your feelings and allow yourself complete freedom to write whatever you want. No one but you is going to read that letter. You can swear, you can curse, you can bless. Yeah, it's okay, you can curse. In this case, it's just your letter after all. No one is going to read it, but write down everything that you think, you have, write down every, I'm going to use the word crime. Allow me to use it, but I don't mean it in the conventional sense. But write down every crime you've committed against your emotions, against your body, against your being. Do your best so that you don't feel any shame, any guilt. Just write. It's not about shame, it's not about guilt, it's about writing, and no one is going to judge you because no one is going to read this except you. Be sure that you are writing to yourself directly, as if you are talking to yourself. This is self-talk. You might want to spend a few days writing this letter, going back, adding more things as you remember. Excuse me. Once you start writing, you'll be surprised at how much stuff comes up. You think about the way you wanted to go and see a movie and you refused. You might think about the way you don't take time, to think about you and reflect and write. You might think about the way you stunted your legs by not using them, if you are supposed to be a dancer or you wanted to dance. Things that you think, your body should be doing, but you are not doing them. So read this letter to yourself with emotion, with spirit. Read it. You can yell, you can shout if you want to, but read it as many times as you like until it feels that you've completed it. Then burn it. And as you bang this letter, just let go. It doesn't mean that you won't be haunted so by the same feelings. It doesn't mean that you will not let yourself down. It doesn't mean that sometimes you want to do it, but time doesn't allow, but it means that you are conscious. Even when you know that my well-being, today was supposed to be this and that, and I didn't. Yes, you are conscious. You didn't. You forgive yourself. Tomorrow you do it. But you are aware, you are conscious. And you can do this exercise maybe once a month. You can do it, as often as you want. You can carry out this exercise at work, where you sit in a circle, of colleagues, and you look at the organization, and you say those things that you want to forgive it for. I think Mary Anna talked about them, and Haida talked about them. When you think about your organization, what do you want to forgive it for? What crimes has it committed against you and your colleagues? Is it overworking? Is it, a culture of people just working as individuals without bringing in their well-being, things? Is it a culture of staying in your office and you never meet, even in the kitchen, share a cup of tea? Is it a culture where well-being is despised? What is it? What crimes what crimes has the organization committed against you? Where is it that things, could be better? So you can, as staff, write this letter together and then keep it. And then, I think we should also cultivate a culture of gratitude, where every day, before you go to bed, you journal things that you are grateful for. You get your journal, or you can get a basket and write and put in the basket the things you are grateful for, or you can write a journal. The most important thing is to handwrite, because there is power in handwriting. End of the week, if you're in the organization, or end of the month, you can see what each one of you is grateful for. And by reading these things, you start to understand how important it is to share these, ideas, because that's how culture is formed. If you find people are grateful that they have been able, they have been able to meet and share a cup of tea. They are grateful that, that people are beginning to hug. I'm not talking about COVID-19 now. They are grateful that, they are remembering each other's birthdays. Then, this is part of the culture. This is what people want. Culture should be that which facilitates, which enables, which makes workspace beautiful. And then at a personal level, of course, end of the day, just even 5 minutes and reflect on what you are grateful for. So I've talked about setting boundaries, no matter how difficult it is, and it takes time. It takes time to set boundaries without guilt, without shame, without fear, and be firm about setting those boundaries. Yes, you might break them once in a while, but start and be firm. I've also talked about nurturing, the way we nurturing ourselves and ensuring that we take care of our emotions. That has been, that builds on the previous discussions. And I'm talking about this nurturing at a personal level, but organizational level as well. And one of the ways of nurturing oneself is to keep writing to your body, your emotions, and your spirit. Whenever you can, a long letter. Writing is part of healing, but also, writing is avoiding an overload of emotions, ensuring that, you don't overload the mind, the body, the spirit. You pour it on paper, and then you thank the body for bringing you this far, and you promise to be more gentle, to treat it well, and to be more loving towards the body. So self-love is political, and as they say, it's the most radical act that one can ever do. So When are you going to write this letter? I don't know, I think some people write it, some don't, but even if you don't, try and think about it. So 2 questions that I hope you can think about. How would you rate your ability to express your emotions? How would you rate your ability to express your emotions? And how much time do you create for simple joys in your life? How much time do you create, maybe in a day, in a week, just for simple joys, whether it is boat riding, whether it's working in your garden, whether it's just running around, whether it's, having fun? Do you budget for it? How much time do you create? So over to you, Mary Ann.
Hello.
And if there are questions.
Yeah, and welcome questions. I wanted to just reflect very briefly on what Hope said. So I didn't share at the beginning, but I got interested in this work originally because I ran a small international NGO for a number of years, and I eventually realized that I had essentially burnt myself out by being very overcommitted to the work. That was a long time ago now, but one of the things that saved me in that time, that helped me through that time, was a writing practice that someone invited me into, where I would write every morning about all the struggles that I had in that work, which felt pretty immense at the time. And I would just keep writing, never showed it to anyone. I ripped it up rather than burnt it, I think, because it was in the office and you weren't allowed to burn things in the building or whatever. But basically I would write it and just and that was one of the things that just kept me going enough to be able to move through. So it remains one of my practices today. And the other thing that I go back to, and I think for everyone there's a different thing, it's not like everyone has to have the same practice, although writing helps a lot of us, I think. But for me, the other thing is dance, is movement, and really integrating that into my day. So not being like, oh, I'll go to a dance class when I have time or when I can find the online Zoom dance class, but actually being like, oh, I've got 5 minutes now, I'm going to put on a tune I like, a bit like we did at the beginning and end. So not making it into this thing that I then have to remember, and then when I forget I get to blame myself on all that, but actually really integrating that. And I think we can think about those things in organizational ways too, right? I know I've heard Jessica Horn talk about AWDF having like I did an interview with her once where she was talking, it's an African Women's Development Fund for those that don't know, and they have like, a dance time in the afternoon, like we all just go and have a quick dance for 15 minutes or whatever. So those kind of things, I think we can integrate them into our organizational life and of course we need like leaders who are willing to embrace those things to make that possible. And I think we can all bring our pieces of that to our teams, and the other thing that I wanted to share around boundaries was I do sometimes do an exercise with people who struggle with this idea of saying yes and no, where it's actually like a role play exercise, and someone asks you, so I might do it with a team of people and they get into pairs, and then I invite people to request something of the other person, like a role play, and the person gets to practice just saying no, and like how many times can they say no before it feels uncomfortable for them, and then if it feels uncomfortable, just notice, but keep saying no, and then practicing saying yes. So it becomes like a practice that you're able to not carry quite so much, like, because people often carry like a lot of struggle internally, emotional struggle with saying no. Not everyone, of course, some people struggle with saying yes, but if you do struggle with saying no, it can help just to practice saying no a lot and have someone role play asking lots of things of you, and just get comfortable literally with the language. Yes, I wanted to share those things. Heide, I invite you do you want to come on and share a few reflections?
That's very interesting as well, because in the coaching work I do, and when I talk to other aid workers trying to find a way to recover from their burnout, one of the saying no and creating boundaries and looking after themselves, for them, are not considered strategies for recovery. Often we tend to think there's a tendency to want something like, tell me what to do so I can just go fix it. But recovering from burnout and kind of managing your well-being is more of a habit that you build stone by stone, step by step, and it has something that you nurture every single day. So yes, saying no is one of the things that I definitely hear a lot, particularly, and I must say this, particularly among female clients, because they feel like if they say no, it will look bad on them. They might not get the opportunity again, or they sort of misunderstood, like, oh, you can't do this, or you don't have the capacity and things like that. So a lot of my clients have felt like saying no just put them at a disadvantage. So what I've worked with in terms of helping clients to kind of create the boundaries by saying no more is to start really with a lot of small things. Like, you can say no to working just one thing, just do one no to a day kind of thing. Like saying no to, if you're invited to lunch and you tend to eat lunch in front of your computer, just say no to eating in front of the computer, go eat lunch for your colleagues. um, and that has been interesting. And a few other things I would say that help, that I've used with the organizations I work for and organizations I've worked with, I've seen that help people kind of integrate a little bit more in that culture together to support each other, has been creating rituals. So in one organization that I work for, every Friday, this is in the Middle East, every Friday we would eat a lunch together. So somebody in the entire unit will cook for like 10, 12 people, and then we come together. It forces everyone to be there, because if you're not there, you're being quite rude. So everybody would, every other week we would have a different person cook, and the ritual of sitting down together and kind of catching up, like, oh, how you doing? How's your family? How's your cat? How's your new baby? You start making a little bit more connection, because you start seeing the persons more than just like, the reporting officer, the finance person, but as someone with a history. A little bit about their family, what's going on with their parents, and it helps to kind of make people feel a little bit more connected, that they're seen as individual, they're appreciated as more than just the logs person, the procurement, the country director, that they're all, aside from the position and responsibility, they are still individuals. And I think helping people to recognize that they're more than just their title and the day-to-day job they do, can be really powerful in helping people to create that identity for themselves, something along like what Hope was saying, like, what are your creative things that you do for yourself? How do you see yourself aside from the work you do? And I think if we were to really tackle mental health and hopefully, put burnout as not a norm, we need to start helping individuals in the workspace create, identities that's more than just their job title. I always ask myself, like, how many times when I go to the office do I ask, a colleague, like, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Like, what did you do? How's your parents? And I learned this a lot when I was living for a long time in Sierra Leone and Sudan, because I love how people would embrace me, and they, every morning it's always like, how you sleep? How do you body? How's your mom and dad? And for a long time, I never understood this, because as an Asian, it's all a bit like, you don't throw your stories out there. But I've come to kind of be okay with sharing a bit of who I am aside from work. And that helped me to kind of feel appreciated, but at the same time also, I think, help create a routine where I can see my colleagues and go to them and sort of ask for help or ask a question without feeling guilt or shame, or like I need to prove that I'm tough and things like that. So I've always enjoyed kind of talking a lot about creating a culture just in our immediate work setting and how we treat each other, because that's the first basis. If someone's burning out, finding you have to give permission to yourself to care, so that the person is not going through their own kind of mental anguish, and you're just like, oh, it's not my problem. We need to start putting away all of that barriers and start asking, like, look, you don't look so good, can I help you with something? Can I get you a cup of tea? It's just basic everyday little strategies that we can start doing for ourselves and for others around us. Just one colleague, just look out for one colleague every other day. Just ask how they're doing, get them an ice cream or a cup of tea or something like that. That's what I used to basically help my clients with when they feel like they're struggling with their own burnout. for them to start caring about someone in the office, that they start to care about themselves. Because if they're inviting someone for a coffee, they'll be like, yeah, let's go get a coffee. You know, it's a basic thing to do together. So yeah, I mean, but it's a journey. So it takes time to kind of start doing this stone by stone, step by step. Yeah. Back to you, Marianne.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of these practices seem so simple, and they are so simple. Like, we can all do them, and in some ways, many of them don't need to cost a lot of money, you know, for us to do these day-to-day things. But there's something about us sort of shifting our habits, shifting how we relate to each other, shifting how we show up to the work, and some of the things we discussed today that can really, over time, help culture to shift. And I think key to it is something you said ages ago, near the beginning of the webinar, Haida, about you know, burnout's not your fault, and but there are strategies that you can engage in, and if we all engage in them, and particularly if people who are in positions of authority engage in them with their teams, and you know, maybe you create a time in the week where everyone comes together and eats a meal and we don't talk about work. Maybe all these small pieces are what build culture, and what means that we don't have this culture is that these small pieces are not there, and instead we're eating at our desk, we're never talking to anyone, we're not doing the things that nourish us, that Hope was pointing us to. It's the not doing of all these things that's in part creating these cultures. And then of course there are things in our organizations that we might want to advocate to change, in terms of what the organization's providing, in terms of mental health services, in terms of the need maybe for supervision or some kind of peer support in our work, in terms of all kinds of things, that initiatives that could be taken at organization-wide levels. But I think today we really wanted to also focus in on these practices that we can all be a part of bringing change to. We've got a question about resourcing, and I was kind of trying to lead us into it a bit, because someone's asked, resourcing is a key issue you've discussed, but it can be really challenging to get donors to fund flexibly enough to resource these initiatives adequately. Do you have suggestions for how to make a case to them, or of donors that are willing to resource well-being? Hope, I wondered if you wanted to say anything about how we make a case for well-being.
My experience is that most funders are beginning to understand the importance of that, but not to perhaps say it as well-being, but as part of improving organizational performance. We are improving organizational performance. We are improving, you know, we are improving the quality of work and the quality of people that we are employing, and much more. This is sustainability, because when people are not well, the initiatives are not sustainable. Fragmented people produce fragmented results. So if we just say well-being, it stands alone, you know, and it should never, I think well-being should never stand alone. It's part of everything. But if we are going to sustain energy, that is going to sustain organizations and produce sustainable organizations, then we need funding. So my experience is that when we talk about well-being, the way we are talking about it, it's not seen as the work. It's not appreciated. But when we talk about it in the context of sustainability, in the context of higher production, in the context of ensuring that our constituencies, that what we give our constituencies is sustainable as well. Because when we go there broken, sometimes what we do is also not sustainable. I think it's understood better, so that well-being is not a standalone issue, but it's part of some of the major issues that we've been thinking about in organizations.
Yeah, great. I just started looking for a piece of research, which is actually by Deloitte, and I can't find it right now, but we can send it out afterwards. And they talk about the number of days lost from poor mental health of employees. And it's a very, and it's not actually in the international NGO sector, it's in the public sector. And their research, makes a really strong case for well-being support in the public sector as being critical to reducing the number of employee days that are lost. as a result of people's poor mental health. And so there is research out there, not that much of it in our sector, but in other sectors, in the corporate sector and the public sector, that really demonstrates the importance of supporting your people. So yeah, I think that's true in terms of advocating for funding. That's often that need. And then I think that, you know, there is this a much broader argument for more flexible funding in our sector, you know, not just because of this issue, but because of many other issues. And I think this can be part and parcel of that, you know, that actually organisations deserve to be able to decide how best to use their resources. And so that, you know, that's something around how we advocate for funders in more general terms around flexible resourcing. But I think when we're looking for specific funding for wellbeing within, you know, quite specific restrictive funding, that, you know, that making the case is probably the, you know, the best thing to do. Did you want to add anything, Haida?
I don't have I mean, I am frustrated about this. Let me just be blunt about this, because when I write proposals and we try to include things like this, or, you know, an additional counselor or a position based somewhere we could help staff, you know, to do for talk therapy or initiatives, there's always, there's a lot that still we need to change about how we kind of talk about this, and how we talk about this, you know, in a way that we need to emphasize how important it is, because it is everything that has to do with the welfare and well-being of the people who are working every single day to do the projects and things like that. For me, my frustration has always been around the fact that we don't know how to talk about this as much. We collectively, as the aid sector, we don't know how, we have yet to come together to kind of really push for this, really push it in a way such that, you know, this is not just an afterthought. It's just not like, you know, extra miscellaneous activities that we do. Let's just send you for a stress management training. It has got to be more than that. We need to kind of collectively, as a community, as the aid sector, just like we do for sexual harassment and all of the other issues, we need to find a way to talk about mental health and well-being in a way that you have got to start thinking about and talking about this quite seriously, like the donors have to. And we have got to just really make our voice a lot louder. It's no more like, oh, would you like to consider funding this? It's really like, you have to fund this, because this is how we have to keep our stuff safe and healthy, and well. Because if not, there are repercussions to communities as well, and things like that. So I don't have a perfect strategy, but I know that I've been annoyingly constantly asking my donors and like my senior leadership, and I'm sure it frustrates them because I keep asking, and, you know, but even when it's not like, you know, immediately funded initiatives, we still have got to have senior leadership and management taking initiatives within the organization to start changing things for the better, you know. Setting in, I know, simple policies, or basically, you know, fine, start with something that does not necessarily need too much funding, but something that, you know, being able to recognize when your staff are burnt out and things like that. We can't just rely and wait for funding and for donors to come around and then we say like, now we have got to do something, because that's going to take a while, and we have got to kind of, you know, push the envelope, push that agenda, like right, left, and center. And that's I think what we have to do. It's no longer well-being and, you know, mental awareness and you know, self-care in the aid sector cannot no longer be an afterthought. It has to be at the core of how we treat each other, at the core of how senior management, senior leadership, organization treat its staff, with or without donor funding. I don't believe that we cannot find the funding. We can find a lot of other things that are necessary. We can find the money to fund some of these initiatives. So,
yeah. So I want to, there's another question that I want to take, and then we want to just share a little bit more about how you could get involved with the initiative before, because I see the time is going. So I have a question that I want us to take. So someone is asking, we've not talked about bullying from managers who are not held accountable, who are often responsible for burnout. how do we protect ourselves from them when we're empathetic, perhaps, and not very good at putting boundaries in place? And then what do we advise, or what do you say, what do we advise organizations to do about that? Hope, would you like to come in on that one around boundaries in that context?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first part.
Okay. So what about bullying from managers who are not held accountable, who are often responsible for burnout? How do we protect ourselves? So I was thinking, how do we protect ourselves from them when we're empathetic, perhaps, and maybe not very good at putting boundaries in place? And then what do we advise organizations to do?
Thank you very much. That is a very difficult one, but I think that as long as we can form a critical mass of people demanding well-being, it will be, even managers will be forced to listen. Let me share a little example of what happened in one organization. A manager came in and he was really very, very strong. He said, he knew many things, and, he didn't take anyone's ideas into consideration. So one day, she wrote a proposal, and senior staff looked at it, and it didn't appear like a very strong proposal that would get the organization money. So they decided to go and talk to the manager about it. The manager got a cup of coffee. He put his little finger like this. He said, "You see this little finger? When I put it in coffee, the level doesn't change. That's how I see your opinion. No matter what you say, nothing is going to change." I mean, that's how arrogant she was. Said, "I put my little finger in my cup of coffee, nothing changes. That is the way I see you. Your opinions are not going to change anything." So one by one, they left her, and she was a hard worker. By the way, this is a real story. Then one day she was working, it was a Saturday, there was no one at the office. She went to the office and then went to the bathroom and collapsed. If you have those kinds of feelings, collapsing is not difficult. She collapsed. And then the only person who could resuscitate her was the cleaner, toilet cleaner, who administered mouth-to-mouth breathing. So the same cleaner called an ambulance. He took her to hospital. And when she was recovering, she was told about the story, especially the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation done by a toilet cleaner, whose name she didn't even know. One who would not have made a difference in her life, one she despised, she just resigned. She didn't know how she'd go back and face the toilet cleaner. She didn't know the name of the person, but that he did mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She couldn't go home and face staff. Back to office and face staff. She couldn't. There were many things, and she was not the type that would apologize and really understand. So maybe there are stories we need to tell our managers indirectly or directly. There are ways we need to form critical mass in staff meetings and, politicize well-being so that they understand it. Because even in the corporate sector, where they kind of understand it, the aim is not that you get well. The aim is that you are more productive. The aim is not that you do things for yourself. The aim is that you put in more work, because when you are well, you produce more. So how do we make this part of, our staff meetings? How do we, when we are asked our opinion, do we incorporate this? How do we start, from where we are? Whether it is one-on-one, whether you form your own community, if the organization is not providing that, how do we do this? I think we need to be very, very political and deliberate, wherever we are together as staff, and be able to raise these things so that we can be supported by others. If we are in a position of including items of well-being to our human resources, manuals, we should do that. If we can find ways of communicating with our managers, yes, we can do that. And if this doesn't work, then we have to learn to create communities of support. Whether these communities of support are at work, whether it is, away from work, but we need these communities of support, because without these communities of support, we are going to burn out. And needless to say, there are times when you say, my life is in trouble, I've done everything I can, I've failed, I'm going to have faith that I'll have another job, that I can do something else and live, because people have been known to die because of toxic working environments.
Yeah.
Over to you, Mary Ann.
Yes, thanks, Hope. I would agree with all of that, absolutely. And there's always, I think there's the building of support for yourself, finding kind of allies within an organization to try and push for change. There's, working to try and make things different. And then there's always, like Hope said, the point where you choose that actually, I'm not going to stand for this. I think that's right. So I wanted to just share a little bit about the initiative the ongoing initiative we have planned. So today was kind of a lot of us talking, and you're here, but we're not seeing you today and stuff. But what we're hoping to do going forward as part of the initiative, being organised by CHS Alliance, is that we're going to be organising conversations where the people attending them get really involved in talking about these issues, in discussing what's happening in their organisation, in learning from each other about different strategies, different things that they can try, about what works, about what's not working, about the things they're really struggling with, and about coming up with ideas together for things that we can do to push some of these issues up the agenda of our organisations and in the sector more generally. Through CHS Alliance, which has a number of members, working with Bond, working together to try and uplift this issue, because it feels like it's time. So we're going to be organising conversations that are regional initially. So Hope will be facilitating a conversation in East Africa. Haida will be facilitating one in the Middle East. We're facilitating one that's more UK based. Of course, we're all virtual at the moment due to COVID. We kind of imagined these originally as lovely places where you came to also share, but at the moment they're going to be virtual, so on Zoom, but where you can see each other, where we can have breakouts, maybe where we can talk. And there'll be others in other parts of the world. So if you are interested in finding out more about these conversations and potentially participating in them, you can express your interest. There's a link that I've just put in the chat, but we will also send it around afterwards. So it could be you, it could be someone in your organization. What we ask is that the people that come to these conversations have a commitment to exploring this issue, and not just from a single perspective, but from this broad perspective of thinking about people management, about mental health, about organizational culture, and about the whole piece, and how to uplift it in their organization, and that there's someone that can have some impact on their organization, because we want to support organizations to be able to think more about these issues, as well as to think about kind of sector-wide change. And then another thing that we have, and I'll find the link shortly, is we've also started making a podcast, and we're doing blogs as well that share best practices, information, some stuff about organizations that have tried different things that are, and may have gone well, may have gone less well. And so just to share more information and bring people together to talk about different aspects of these issues more than we've been able to cover today. So I'll put the link shortly for the podcast as well. But if you or your colleague would like to join these conversations, they're going to be run over a period of time, and there'll be a few sessions that you sign up to. And you come and share and get ideas and help us build some momentum around this issue as well. So we'd love to have people participate in those. If you've not signed up already, please do so. But we've got 8 minutes before we close. Welcome any final questions from people, and then I'm going to give both of Hope and Haida another chance to say a few words before we close. So is one of you ready? Haida,
Sorry.
It's okay, I thought you were talking. Yeah.
I was about to, and then I just, kind of spaced out a little bit. I think this is a great start to kind of more conversations coming up. And like what Marianne was saying, I think those upcoming conversations are really going to help us create a community of support with each other. And something I'd like to emphasize is that, you know, in this journey where we're trying to advocate more, you know, caring and compassionate leadership in organizations, it is high time that we all come together to be able to do this together, and not like, you know, you're not doing this just on your own. There's a whole lot of us here willing and ready and able to support you. So I really look forward to more conversations as such. And, you know, and just for the everyday, I also just kind of want to send a quick message to everyone who's here today. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation with us. And wherever you are in this journey, I just really hope you know that you're not alone, you're not struggling. So if you ever want to reach out to any one of us, we're here. So thank you so much for today.
Okay, thanks very much. I want to emphasize that well-being is work. It doesn't just happen. It's something we budget for financially, emotionally, and spiritually. The budget sometimes is not in the form of money, but in the form of taking time from one activity to the other activity. Second, I want to emphasize that your body is your vehicle. It is the one that facilitates your journey through planet Earth, the journey of life, as long as you are still alive, to the end. So because it is your vehicle, we want us to pay attention to that vehicle, to love it, thank the vehicle, thank the body for where it has carried you up to now, for ask forgiveness where you haven't always paid attention, and promise to take care of it. And third, say that well-being is political. It's not just a technical thing, because it's political because you have to deal with your own power within, you have to manage power above, and you also have to manage that hidden power that tells you that it's not important, that you don't have to do it, that, you know, after all, you know, you are serving community. Serving communities is a little part of well-being, but serving yourself first and then serving them is even much better. And finally, as Ed has said, it's a journey. We are on this journey, and sometimes it's two steps forward and one step back. And sometimes it appears as if we are just spitting in the wind. You know, we are spitting in the wind, we do this, you know, it comes back and hits us in the face. But little by little, you get into it, it becomes your well-being, it becomes the culture, and eventually we create a critical mass, a community that really understands well-being and pushes it wherever they are. So thanks very much for this webinar. Thanks for honoring us by coming. And thanks for prioritizing yourselves, because this is what you've done. Thank you, Mary Ann.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think I want to express my gratitude to both of you, Hope and Haida, for being part of this work with us and for being here today and sharing so much of your work and yourselves. And thanks everyone for joining us. We hope to engage with you again. We'd love to see you in the conversations we've planned. We'd love to engage with you, and we'll follow up with an email with the information that people have asked for. For now, we hope you took away something that will help you today, tomorrow, and in the future. And I think, hi, Lena.
No, you can finish.
Yeah, no, that was it. We hope you took away something that will be of use, and thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, that was it.
Just to add my thanks on top of thanks and thanks and thanks, to amplify what Hope said, thanks for prioritizing yourself and spending 2 hours with us, because not many people are doing that nowadays, and we hope at least it gave you a bit of a breathing space from your normal day-to-day, which is what we all need. A huge thanks to CHS Alliance, to Marianne, Hope and Nahida. Thank you for sharing part of yourselves with us. And to everyone else, please do let us know what you thought of this webinar, and keep an eye on more webinars coming up soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.